Hello everyone! We should be live now on YouTube on the Frugal Crafter YouTube channel. My name is Lindsay and today with me I have my daughter Lila moderating.
Hi!
So if you have a question throughout the stream, if you can type the word question in all caps and then type the rest of your question just in normal upper and lowercase letters, that way YouTube doesn't boot it out, then Lila can relay that question to me. We also usually have quite an assortment of lovely moderators in the chat that can help you out with questions as we go along if it's something I've covered in a past live stream. We're going to be working with watercolors today, and we're going to paint this King Protea flower. There is a reference photo linked up, and I did print it out here. Information on the reference photos in the video description, so you can find it, print it out yourself. I will go over the drawing of this after we've started our painting, and I know that sounds kind of weird. The reason for this is because we're going to paint our background first, and it will just give us a little time to let that dry. So I always recommend you watch a tutorial through first and then try to paint along. It's just a little bit easier, and that way if you're watching live, then you can enjoy chatting with friends in the live chat on YouTube. If you're watching this on my blog, just click the link that says go over to YouTube and watch it, or something to that effect above the video, and you can see the live chat as it happens at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. There, I think that's all I need to say. Do I have any questions or anything yet? Okay, great. So we're going to use an interesting paper today. I just did my little kind of pre-sketch here in my Arteza sketchbook. I really enjoyed this sketchbook. It's the one with the cloth cover. So I want to mention that because they have another one that I don't like as much. This I really enjoy the paper. This is some paper that is interesting because it actually folds up into a canvas. This is cotton watercolor paper, so the original size of this paper is 11 by 14, but when you fold it up, you get like about I would say, what's it say? 7 inches by 8.6 inches, so it's quite a bit smaller. I drew this in pencil already before folding up my paper. I figured it'd be easier to fold it up first, so we'll see how this goes. But I will go over the drawing with you after we've got our background painted in, so if you're watching the replay and you want to see the drawing, you can skip ahead and then come back and watch how to paint the background. And also, if you wouldn't mind giving me a like while you're here, hitting that thumbs up button, that really does help my channel, helps people find my videos and find the live stream, and it's just a real nice thing to do.
There's a question.
Yes, what's a question?
What do you think about using oils and acrylics on canvas paper?
On canvas paper, yeah, that's fine. Canvas paper has been primed. It's usually a sheet of canvas that's been primed with an acrylic gesso, and it's suitable for oils or watercolors. There's also watercolor paper that's primed for oils. Arches makes it. And yeah, as long as you've got the right primer in there for the paint you're using, you're going to be fine. And then it stores really well. I'm going to start by making a nice juicy puddle of ultramarine blue. Now this is from the Lucas, my signature set through Jerry's Artorama, which is a Lucas paint set. It is currently out of stock. We've been trying to put more sets together. It's sold out twice, so it might be a while before we get it back in stock. These are crazy times, guys, but you can use whatever paint you have. Ultramarine blue is the first color we're going to use. And you just want to make sure you have a nice big puddle of it, because once we start painting, we want to do the whole background. We don't want to have to stop and start. I'm also going to get a puddle of olive green. You can also use sap green. Whatever you have handy is going to be fine. You just want a fairly luminous, earthy green. Just get that puddle going. Now those are colors that I use a lot. I use olive or sap. It depends on the brand, because some brands I prefer their olive green, like Sennelier and Winsor & Newton, and Lucas I really like their olive green. Same with Winsor & Newton. Other brands I prefer their sap green, such as M. Graham. They have a really rich sap green. I'm also going to want to get some burnt umber, which actually does look a little bit more like a nice transparent burnt sienna, which I like in this line.
Question.
Yes.
What do you have the Arteza paper mounted on? It looks raised.
It's not mounted on anything. It's you fold the paper up. It's a special. Let me see if I can show you here. Let me tear one of these out and show you. I'm gonna move this paint right out of the way so it doesn't get it dirty here. But I don't know if you can see the score lines on this paper. Maybe if I tip it, you can. But you rip off these corner pieces. It takes a few minutes to fold it up just because it's really thick paper. It's 140-pound paper. But you tear these off on each corner, right? And then there are little score lines so you can fold up the paper and make your own frame. It's linked down below, and I think they probably have a troubleshooting. So when you fold it all up, you get this, you know, you get this frame in the back. So if you want to find out some more information about that, you can. Let's see, it folds up on each side, then you hook the tabs together and you've got like a canvas, but it's paper. So it's just kind of a neat thing. I was really curious to try it. Because it was cotton paper, I figured it's going to be pretty decent. And I wanted to give that a whirl. And then you can save these little corners and then test your paper, your paint on it, so that way you know how your paint's going to look on that particular paper if you've never used it before. It's great for swatching colors. All right, I'm going to use my number 10 round. And I'm going to do a controlled wash here, which can be a little tricky because we have all these shapes. But I think it's going to be just fine. I've just never worked on paper like this. This is going to be really interesting. I'm going to start by making a bead across the top. With a controlled wash, you're trying to keep the edge of your wash wet so you don't end up with streaks. And as long as you're working on the active edge of your wash, you should be able to paint quite well without streaking.
There's a question.
Sure.
Can I use watercolor canvas board? Does it act the same?
A watercolor canvas board has like a watercolor ground on it. It does not act the same as paper, but you totally can use that for your watercolor. In fact, you could take a stretch canvas and you could paint it with watercolor ground. I've used the Daniel Smith version. I think Golden might have a version too, but I've never used it. It doesn't really act like paper. I don't care for it as much as paper personally, but it's a personal preference. You might like it more. I just find that it doesn't flow quite as well, and it seems to stay wet a lot longer, and it tends to have a big color shift. Like it shifts a lot paler. So you see how I'm keeping that edge, trying to keep that edge on there. Okay, now I'm going to grab some of the green. I'm going to mix it right in that blue. I'm going to add it to that bead. And you got to tip your paper as you do this so you can keep that bead of paint from running backwards. I'm going to try not to go over any of my petals. Okay. So I think because I know I can handle this part pretty quickly, I'm just going to fill in this area just by working back and forth.
Question.
Yes.
Would you frame it or put a sealer on it?
I would probably put a sealer on it and just hang it up as is. I would probably do like a Dorland's wax and then maybe varnish it after that. Just going to pull this down here. And then I'm going to scoot over here and get this area because I know I don't have as much to cover, and I can hopefully get to it without any streaking. You got to keep that board tipped. So if it's awkward for you to hold this like this, then get like a book or something you can put underneath the edge. And you can do this on regular paper, just tape your paper down. I need to add to the bead here. And I'm going to work this down. So you're always adding color right to the edge, right in that puddle, and then you're bringing it down. And luckily I can see I got some edges. I'll be able to stop soon. And I'll actually blot off my brush with a rag as I get close to not needing any more paint. That way I don't have to deal with a puddle. And don't worry if your wash isn't perfect, because we're actually going to be doing some texturing on this, so it's not going to matter if you have some streaks. But it's a great practice. So I'm just going to stop there because that's a good stopping point. I can fill in these other areas after. I'm going to go in and add a little bit more color to this and start bringing this down. I might have a streak there where I didn't keep a bead. I should have caught that, but I didn't. Yep, I'm going to get a little streak there. I can see it already, but it's not going to be a big deal.
Question, what was the name of the sealing wax?
Dorland's is what I've used. Dorlands. It comes in a jar and it's like a paste, and you would apply that with a soft rag over your work, and that would give you a wax-based seal. I was experimenting and using some then that video will be up tomorrow actually, using some chalk paint wax, the kind that you would put on furniture. on some postcards, and that seemed to work all right, but I don't know if I would trust it on a painting. I think it's fine for like a, you know, like a just a crafty postcard, but I don't know if I would trust it with my artwork, just because, you know, it's kind of a off-brand use for it. Basically, we're going to fill in everything that's not the flower or the focal point foliage. Alright, let's get that bead going again. Just going to pull that down. I'm trying to keep the edges white, but I don't know. I might want to go back in later and just like color it with like a solid color or paint it with something else, just to give it a nice neat frame. I think that will be very difficult to keep a very very neat edge on this, so you can always tape it off too. I just don't know about pulling the tape off. That might bother it. I shouldn't go back into the wash, but I had to fix that.
Question, what is the brand of the paintbrush?
This is Creative Mark Mimic. That's also included in the in my signature kit through Jerry's Artorama, and that is linked down below if you want more information. You can get the brushes open stock through Jerry's. Actually, everything, all refills can be purchased open stock. So if you run out of a color paint, you can buy another pan, or you can buy a tube and refill your palette that way. I wanted to make sure that, you know, you weren't going to have to go buy a new set if you use up alizarin crimson or something like that.
Question, is
Yes.
there a picture of the sketch posted on your blog?
No, but we're going to draw it together with markers, but I could, like, scan that, I suppose, or take a photo of it and post that, if you guys want me to. And I'm just going to go in, and I added some brown to my paint here towards the bottom just to give it an earthier appearance. I was going to take a photo of this sketch before we started, but I couldn't find my phone, and then by the time I found my phone, it was about time to go live. And now I'm just going to fill in all these little bits that are just kind of left over here. I'm using the number 10 round, which has a nice point. If you do want to switch to a smaller brush, you can. The nice thing about a bigger brush is that it will hold more paint. How many people do we have, Lila?
Almost 200.
Wonderful. Wonderful. When I went and checked before we were going live, it was about an hour ago, and I saw that YouTube had changed my time zone, because when I set up the live stream event, I had 2 p.m. Eastern time, everything was fine, and then I went and checked back and it was like, nope, you got Pacific time. It's like, how long have I had a YouTube channel? I've never been in Pacific time. I guess I keep going back to the old version of YouTube to do my live streams because I don't know how to do it in the new version of YouTube Creator Studio, and I think it changed my time zone. Alright, so we're going to set this aside to dry so you can kind of see what our design looks like. I'm going to look back at my photo here. It looks like it's all leaves in there, so I guess I'll just leave that as it is for now. I might do some shading in it, but we'll let that dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to go over the drawing section here, and I'm just working on the back of like a just an advertisement because why not, right? Why not? Okay, so I'll be drawing this with a marker, so it'll be a little messy because this is how I draw, and I would just erase the lines that I don't need. So I would start off with this center of the flower. I don't want it smack dab in the middle. I want it a little bit off and up into the corner a little bit. Of course, you could do this on a square like I did in my sketchbook. I would start with a circle. Okay, then I would find kind of a point area, and then I would turn that circle into like a Hershey Kiss shape. Okay. Now I would be drawing this with very little pressure with a pencil so that I can go and erase all of this extra stuff. Then I would start putting in my petals, which are kind of spiky, and they radiate from the center. I think this flower is from South Africa. I've never seen them like in flower shops or any place. You don't see them bouquets around here. I thought they were really pretty. And I'd seen people like post like on Instagram this beautiful flower, and it's like I didn't even know how to describe it, so I just like Googled really pretty huge flower, and I was able to find a Wikipedia on it. I'm sorry, was there another question?
Yeah. Would you recommend painting first and folding when finished? You really can't put any pressure from your hand while painting, right?
Well, with watercolor, you really don't need a lot of pressure. I thought it'd be easier to fold it up first because sometimes your paper warps a bit when you're painting. So that's why I did it this way. If I was going to do like a colored pencil piece on this, I would definitely paint it first and then fold it up. But with watercolor, I think I would fold it up first because the tension, I think, will keep it flatter if it's folded first. Now for texture on this, you don't really need to paint to draw this, but there's like kind of like little ends of flower petals you're seeing up here, and then you get kind of like longer flower petals. I think that's what they are. And then you've got these kind of spikier ones in here that are yellow. And I put as much detail as you need. I wouldn't put a ton. I'm getting some glare on that because it's kind of glossy. There we go. Then we've got these little, just tiny little petals here, kind of like a succulent, really. We've got the stem. And then we've got our leaves, and the leaves seem to have kind of a wavy quality to them, and they look like the petal would be pretty thick.
Question:
Yes.
How would you rate the Arteza journal for watercolors?
I like the one with a fabric cover. I do not care for the spiral bound one. The spiral bound one was the one they first came out with, and that's got a cellulose paper, and it's got this almost like canvas print or linen print on it, like it's been pressed in an embosser or something. But the new one has a much more random grain to the paper, and I really like it, and it just seems to really hold up to watercolor and mixed media. It's not great for marker. If you use a lot of alcohol marker, it's not going to be that great for you because it absorbs too much ink, but for watercolor and other mixed media. So that's really all you need. It's not a difficult flower. It's really not much, it's really no more difficult than doing a daisy or a cone flower. Just remember you get that Hershey Kiss shape in the center, and then you've got these spiky leaves coming off. And you can always print off the reference photo that I have linked down below, and you could always trace that. So, you know, do whatever works for you, and get that picture down there. It's not a tough one to draw though. And then if you want to like here, I did a round one. I did a square, and I plunked it right in the center. And on this one, I'm trying to like kind of fill in a little bit more, have it like kind of tipped. Well, actually, I tipped that one a little bit. The photo was kind of pointing straight up. But you can do that however you want. Now this is dried up enough for our next step, and we are going to move on to that. We're going to use a flat brush for this next step.
Someone says that I can't decide what to get, Mr. Graham or Dr. Smith.
Oh, Daniel Smith or M. Graham. They're both great. What's that?
It was just M and D, so
I think they just abbreviated. They're both great paints. It's completely up to you. They're both made in the USA. They're both fantastic quality. But between the two, I prefer M. Graham. But I think it's because I've used M. Graham longer. I think M. Graham's a better value. Generally, it costs less per ounce. That would be my preference, but they're both great. You're really not going to go wrong with either of them. Okay, so I want to get this kind of like grassy feeling in the back. You can see there's all this kind of like grassiness there. I don't want this all grass though. You can see I let some blue show through there. And I want to be careful not to hit the petals. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to kind of dance my brush across the surface. Just kind of like using the chisel edge. Loading up with different color, either brown or the olive green, and just kind of getting some texture. This is just background, so I don't want it to have a lot of defining features. I'm pretty much going until I run out of paint and then reloading. Because the flower itself can almost be a little bit on the fussy side, I want the background to be kind of loose to contrast that a bit. This is what I didn't intend on actually when I was looking at this flower, thinking I'd like to paint that. I was not really considering painting it with watercolors. It didn't strike me as a flower that I would enjoy painting in watercolors as much as oils. But then I was like, well, why not? And I had my sketchbook out, and I thought I'd just kind of play with it and give it a whirl. And I liked it all right. I thought it was kind of fun.
Do you have any tips for finding your artistic style?
Practice, paint. You know, that's the only way, I think. It'll come to you. As your paint gets dry, your brush gets dry, you're going to notice the bristles will spread apart a little bit, and then when that happens, you can actually you can use the flat of the brush and get the little blades of grass. So you can alternate. I'm sorry if my hand's getting in the way. It's hard to do that. You have to keep your brush at a 90-degree angle or you're going to get a wide line. I just want the feeling of this flower just kind of like poking up in a field, just kind of mind its own business, just kind of poking up. And the grass is kind of flattening around it. So see what I mean about not worrying about that background controlled wash? It's great practice, but you're going to be covering it up with this step. But I still think it's worth practicing. All right, so we've got a little texture in the background. It will show up a little bit better as it dries. Right now you're seeing a lot of glare on the grasses that I just painted, so it probably looks like they're barely there, but they'll show up a little bit more. We are going to mix up some purple. I'm going to clean my palette off a little bit here. It's going to be kind of a grade purple. We don't need, we don't want a really bright color, but we want some color in our shadow in the center. And we're going to work with a round brush. I'll use a number 6 this time. I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue. And because I want to gray it down, I'm going to go with the burnt umber. It's opposite. Here, get it grayed down with a little bit heavier on the blue. And I'm going to grab some crimson, alizarin crimson. I'm also going to grab a little magenta because we do end up using some magenta in this, so I like to get the colors all together, and a little bit more blue because I definitely want it to have a purple undertone.
Question.
Yes.
If you were going to, she said kind, but I think she meant find a color or finish a piece you had already started on your couch or somewhere casual, would you rather use like a Tombow or Winsor Newton?
Tombow or Winsor Newton? I'm not sure. Do you mean paint or do you mean marker? Because when I think of Tombow, I think of like markers.
She said good paper.
Can you read the question again?
If you're going to kind of color or finish a piece you had already started on your couch or somewhere casual, would you rather use like a Tombow or Winsor Newton good paper?
Can you clarify that question, please? I don't really understand what you're asking. Now with this mixed here, this a little bit more gray, I'm going in with my darkest area, which is right in here. And I'm giving it some texture just by tapping my brush. I love that contrast in there, so I really want to get that. And I'm also going to bring some of that detail between those longer links of petal down there. Now, what's that?
Markers.
Markers. I like both Tombow and Winsor Newton markers, but they are completely different in the fact that Tombow are a dye base that will fade, and Winsor and Newton are a pigment base which won't fade. So if you're working in a sketchbook, it really doesn't matter. If you're working on a painting that you intend to hang up in light where it could, fade, I would go for the Winsor Newton. I think the Winsor Newton have been pretty good price lately. I don't know if they're discontinuing those markers or what, but so now I've added a little bit. I've mixed up some purple. I've added some of that, waterier, lighter. Now I'm going to add a little bit more magenta and water to that mix to get a warmer, lighter color. And I like to do this quickly while everything's still wet so colors can kind of blend. They do some interesting things when that happens. I really love the way it looks. It was the center of this flower that kept me from not completely abandoning it yesterday when I was working in my sketchbook. And maybe just a little bit of, almost just the magenta on its own. It's up to you how much color you want to put in there. Now I'm going to drag that color and that this is the watery color down a little bit lower. And I'm going to add in some of the olive green. Use sap green. If your olive green is really earthy and muddy looking, use your sap green. Different brands have different formulas. And I'm going to flick up a little bit of this into that bottom part of the center, and I just think those colors look really pretty when they butt up against each other and blend gently. Bright yellow could go brown up against that purple, but this green is just enough off of that color being a complement that it actually just gives you a really soft, pretty, neutral blend. I'm just going to drag some of that color down. Now I can add some yellow on top of the green there. Add some lemon yellow, and then I'm also going to do a little Indian yellow. But only over the green. Now if you wanted to use a credit card scraper, you could do that and you could get some more texture in here, but my pencil marks, I can see them, so I'm not going to do that. Oh, that's a cat. I just heard that yowl. Okay, now I'm going to take some burnt umber, and I'm going to actually add a little crimson to that. Uh-oh, Tally's going to hop up here. Hope she doesn't knock the microphone down.
Just a question.
Yes.
I am still new to watercolor painting, and I struggle with finding the confidence to start painting. Do you have any advice?
Get a cheap sketchbook and just play, because it won't be so precious. Oh, hello, Tally.
Tally.
Watch out for the microphone. Oh, Tally. She loves to come in here when I'm working at the big bench because she can hop up and get scratches. I'm painting the stem. I'm trying to avoid the leaves and the little branches that the leaves come off of. Isn't that a gorgeous brown? It's so transparent and luminous. All right, while that's still wet, I want to paint the stems in and encourage a little bleeding of color. So I want a soupy, pretty wet olive green here. Now the wetter your paint is, the more you're going to have a shift when it dries. So if you've got a background that's really wet, you want to paint it a couple shades darker than you think you want it, because it is going to shift on you. Especially if your background paper is wet and then you're painting on with a really wet color. If you're painting with a fairly dry color on a dry background, you're not going to have that much shift. So just keep that in mind when you're working with really wet color or really watery color, that you are going to have a shift as that dries. Once it's not glossy anymore, it's going to look a lot paler. There we go. Now it's up to you whether you want to leave these little bits of unpainted paper or you want to pull that paint right out to them. It's called sparkle. I think it can look quite pretty, but you might also think it looks a little unfinished. So it's completely up to you what you prefer. Hey Lila, could you hand me that roll of tape up there? I just want to prop this a little bit because I think I'm getting a little too much glare. This might, hopefully that will make it. This thing is so light, it's so weird. It doesn't weigh anything. It feels like it should. It feels like a canvas. I think while I'm at it, I'm going to switch to a bigger brush because I want to be able to carry more paint. I think I'll paint some of these leaves in. In fact, I could do a fairly equal wash on any of these and then not have to worry about keeping them separate.
Question, which brand would you propose to get for a cheap sketchbook?
Honestly, there's a couple I really like, I'm gonna preface this. This is a couple. I really like the Arteza one. It comes in a multi-pack though, so like this one right here, this is 8.5 by 8.5. There's like 64 pages in it, I think, but it comes in a 2-pack for $23 or $24, I think. There was a coupon code in the video description. If you want to try those out, I really like them, but you might not need a 2-pack. If you have a friend you can split it with, that's a great option. The other watercolor sketchbook I really like is Stillman and Byrne. They used to have those at like big box stores, but now I think you'd have to order them online. But what you want is their, or at least the one that I like, is the Beta Series mixed media paper. It's a soft cover sketchbook, and it's got a blue cover, and it comes in a variety of different sizes. I really like that one. And those are sold in individual packs. I think per book they're a little more expensive than the Arteza, but it's really nice paper. On a super budget, I would say go with the Canson XL mixed media paper, for even though you're doing watercolor. I don't think it's quite as robust as the Arteza or the Stillman and Burn, but it's a similar paper, and you get a lot. You get something like either 60 or 90 sheets in the sketchbook, and I think it's under $10 for most sizes. So that one you might even be able to get at like Walmart. Definitely at any like of your local big box art and craft stores. Now while this is wet, I want to drip in some more colors because I love that look. If you don't like that look, then you don't have to do it, obviously. I'm going to add in some of the olive green and just kind of let it have fun and flood around. Bless you.
Thank you.
I'm going to add in some Indian yellow, which is a warmish yellow, so it's not going to give you the acid, yellow color that a lemon would give you. And just watch out for any blooms. I see I've got kind of a puddle there. I got to keep an eye on that. Take some ultramarine blue in with the olive, which will give me a dull, deep, textured green, because ultramarine blue has a lot of texture to it. It granulates. Because the petals are so kind of stiff when we get to the petals, they're a little on the fussy side. Little petals I find are fussy, so because of that I want to have as much looseness in the background to kind of contrast that. And then while I'm at it here, where I can see I'm going around petals, I'm just going to bring that background color in a little bit and just try to integrate the flower into the background, because we did this wet on dry, so things can look a little fussy and like almost like collage, like cut and paste. So if I start to go in with the shadows with this green color, I can kind of integrate that background color and make it all kind of flow together a little bit better, because we'll be glazing over the petal color when we get to that. Add some browns in there too. You have any other questions?
No.
Maybe a little brown over here. And a lot of this I'll just do kind of by feel. If I'm like, oh, I want that a little bit darker over there, I might add some brown. I might mix up a gray with some brown and blue. Just kind of go by what I feel like it needs. Especially if it's a very straightforward reference photo, straightforward type of painting. A lot of times I want to kind of go and add a little bit of my own personal style into it. That weird noise that you might be hearing is the dog in a room above us chewing on a bone. I can just hear the scraping. I don't know if it comes off on the microphone or not.
Is she in my room?
Sounds like it. There, I like that brown. You can do whatever you like though. So then what I'm going to do is make sure this area is dry before I go further on this. So I'm going to just kind of rest the back of my hand, and I can feel that it's not cool to the touch. It's even, so I know that's dry.
There's a question.
Yes.
Should you use Winsor and Newton professional paint fresh from the tube, or is it okay to let them dry in the pellet? Because I heard that they're hard to re-wet.
Yeah, I've heard that too from Winsor and Newton. However, I always let it dry in the palette, and it's never been a problem. And pretty much any artist you ask will say the same thing. I got some magenta here, and I am going to start, I'm trying not to rust my hand in there. I'm going to try to paint this petal with close to one stroke here. Now, if you kind of got into the petal a bit when you were painting your background, you can scrub back a little bit. I don't know if I have any brushes stiff enough here to scrub. This wedge might be. You can scrub back a little bit if you need to. That's not a really good brush. I'm going to grab a scrubber brush really quick. This will work. A little synthetic filbert here. So if you do get some of the ultramarine blue, that's why ultramarine blue is such a great background color, because it is a sedimentary color. It lifts really easily. So if you do get it in your focal area, you can lift it off really easily. I also switched to my number 6 round because that 10 was a little bit big. I'm flipping this around because I know I'm just going to lay my hand in that wet paint. So this is our watery layer. I did not do a good job painting around that little spiky bit there, so I'm going to work a little bit harder to avoid that. So I'm just going in and giving a really pale magenta wash on these flower petals.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, I lost it.
And a little bit darker here at the base of the flower petal.
Do you use photos you take and keep in an album for ideas, or magazines or online?
I either use photos I take, or I use photos from websites that are commercial use. So, and I don't use ones from magazines unless it's just like from my sketchbook and my own, drawing that I'm not going to share online or anything because of copyright. I don't want to get sued for using a photo that I don't have the right to use.
Question. Looking for a quality opaque acrylic paints to learn color mixing, but there are so many blues, yellows, and red variations. Which ones are best for primary color mixing?
Well, actually, transparent paints are better for mixing just because they're less muddy. They're less likely to get muddy. You can buy mixing sets. I'm pretty sure Golden has a mixing set that you can buy. I know Blick has a mixing set in their Blick acrylic line, which is very affordable. It's meant for for schools. I used to use it when I had my school downtown when I taught kids. It was called, I think, Pack of Pints, and you got like a 6-pack of mixing colors in 1-pint bottles. And their student grade is actually pretty decent. I'm not sure about light fastness. It's been ages since I've used it, but that would be a good starting point. But if you want artist grade, try Golden and their mixing set that I'm pretty sure exists. If it doesn't exist, you want to go, I recommend going with a split primary, so you have a warm and a cool version of each primary. So you have, I think I'm getting too much mud in that mix. So you have like a cool red, like a magenta or a crimson. You have a warm red, like a Pyro, Scarlet, or vermilion. You have a cool yellow, like a lemon. You have a warm yellow, like an Indian yellow, or a Gamboge, or a cadmium yellow deep. You have a warm blue, like an ultramarine. You have a cool blue, like a phthalo blue, or a Pression blue. So as long as you have these pure colors that are not like muddy or have a lot of white in them, then you'll be able to learn mixing quite well. But I'm not that familiar with acrylic brands. If you see areas where you got your color into the petal more than you want and it doesn't want to cover up good, just scrub. My favorite scrubbers are the Royal Land Nickel Menta watercolor scrubbers. AC Moore used to sell them before they went out of business, but they're just the right stiffness.
Question: is there a difference between a hog brush and scrubber?
You can use a hog brush for a scrubber. Some scrubbers, I prefer a Golden Taklon scrubber for watercolor because it's gentler than a hog. They also have like really stiff white brush scrubbers, but those are really more for like acrylics or fabric painting. They're so stiff they want to chew up the paper. So that's why I really like the Menta one, or just get a Golden Taklon filbert with short hairs, and that will work pretty well for scrubbing. That's what I'm using here. It's not a scrubber per se, because I couldn't lay hands on it quick enough, on my Menta ones quick enough.
Question: which liquid watercolor would you recommend?
I would say Dr. P.H. Martin Hydrus would be my favorite liquid watercolor. He just had his whole store 50% off a couple weeks ago. Heck of a deal. His inks and paints are excellent. And they're made in the USA too. Okay, so now I'm looking at the little pieces. They're kind of like a yellow, I don't know, it's kind of like just this little fluffy, these little fluffy yellow fringy, that's the word, petals. So I'm going to take some, I'm actually going to mix my Indian yellow and my lemon, because I've been using both yellows, get kind of a neutral yellow. And I'm going to go through and just add that, just little flecks of color. They're not anything that would really stand out too much, so don't worry if they overlap your petals or overlap the background and fade away. It doesn't really matter. They're more for like a little texture. Did Sarah ever show up, Lila?
Yeah.
Yay!
She's talking to everyone about Ruby.
Oh, Sarah, hey! Oh, I'm so
I miss
glad.
Ruby and Sarah.
I
and John.
know, and Penny misses Ruby too.
Yeah.
Our dog is not happy about social distancing. I saw Sarah from afar the other day. She was jogging. Oh, that's good. I'm so glad she made it. People have been asking about you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've got that layer on. Oh, I need to add a little bit up here. All right, now we can do another layer on the on our leaves. I'm going to go back to the larger brush because it's a larger area that I'm going to be covering.
What watercolor colors would you recommend for filling my portable palette for mainly landscapes? Marsh, water, coastal scenes, and some forest scenes too. I mainly like what you like.
My portable painter, I can tell you what's in mine, and that's what I typically use it for, is to go out and paint. I use a Pression blue for my cool blue, ultramarine blue for my warm blue, and I also have a Cobalt Teal. That was a recent addition to my palette because I really like it for oceans. And it just is this has such a nice warm granulating quality because it's a cobalt pigment. For yellows, I have Gamboge and I have Hansa Yellow Light, which is like a lemon. Pigment Y3. Sometimes some companies call it lemon, some call it Hansa Yellow Light, but just look for PY3. That's what is lemon in this palette here. For reds, I have Quinacridone Magenta and Pyro Scarlet. And I also have Dioxin Violet for super dark shadows. I have a sap. I have M-Gram Sap Green in my portable painter. But Sennelier Forest Green would be Sennelier Olive Green would be another good substitute. These are tube paints squeezed into the pans, by the way, in case you don't know. A portable painter is it's just like a little sketch box palette, and you fill it with your own tube paints. Let's see. I also have burnt sienna. I tried transparent brown for a while, and it didn't reliably mix with other colors for me. So I do have a burnt sienna. Let's see. I have yellow ochre. And is that 12 colors? I don't know if that's 12 colors or not, but I do have all 12 filled. I might have another pinky red in there because I do like to paint scenes with flowers. If that's not 12, it's probably the other one's like a permanent rose.
Question.
Yes.
How do you layer up reds and yellows? I find it a challenge, and I don't get the variations as with other colors.
Well, the reason of that, there's a couple of reasons for that. With yellows, most yellows tend to be opaque. and there's not a huge value, there's not a huge contrast value when you layer them up. Like if you layer up, say, phthalo blue, it's a very transparent, strong color, so every layer gives you a much different new shade, and you don't get that when you're using a red or a yellow. The yellows are just very light, and they tend to be opaque, and opaque colors don't really give you anything when you glaze them up. With reds, your more transparent, cooler colors will give you a little more variation, but honestly, I usually have to grab another color to add to it to get the contrast that I want. Generally, I'll do a blue or a purple with it to get the depth without making it muddy, because reds do want to tend to go muddy, and so do yellows. Any opaque color will tend to want to go muddy on you. So try to find a transparent color and then see what you can add to it to be able to glaze up the colors you want without it turning to mud. Because yeah, there you don't really, like I'll show you here, I did like on my swatch here for my paints, what I do is I start kind of dark and then I fade it out with a little water, then I do a glaze on top so I can see how it looks like with a layer on top, and if it's opaque at all, and all that stuff. So you'll see like hardly any difference here on this CAD yellow. Like the glaze and the full strength hardly looks different at all. And you'll notice, you can see the glazing difference on those two reds, but if I went with another layer, I don't think you'd really notice it. So your glazing layers are limited with your warmer colors as well. Forgot where I left off here. I think I was on this leaf. Just adding a little bit of depth to the leaves in back, a little bit blue, a little bit ultramarine blue. Desaturates that green a bit and pushes it back, cools it down, pushes it back. So the colors in front can show up more.
Question is referring to glazing for variations. Can you explain the glazing versus mixing?
Yes, glazing. Mixing is when you take two colors, you put them together on a palette and you paint with that. Glazing is when you have, like I've got that green color there, but I want to brighten it up. So I'll take some yellow and I will just give it a layer of yellow on top. So the light will go through this yellow paint and show you the green underneath and bounce back. So you'll have two layers rather than mixing all those colors up to get the tone that I want and just painting it in one go. You get a little more complex look with glazes. A glaze is simply a transparent layer of color painted over another color. Now I'm going to add a little bit of green into that and let it blend. A little bit more dark under there. With glazes you can tweak and you can push colors a little bit so you get a little more depth here, a little more color there without really, with still keeping what you've already put down.
Question, it appears the paper hasn't buckled much at all. Is there a reason you choose that paper?
No, it really hasn't. I was just curious. I'd never seen anything like it. This is the pad here. It's got this picture of lemons on it. And it's called DIY Frame Watercolor Pad. I have it linked down below to Arteza on Amazon. It's a little cheaper on Arteza. It's a 11 by 14 inch sheet, but when you fold it, it's a 7 by 8.6 size canvas. And you fold it up into this palette. I just thought that was kind of onto this kind of like frame canvas thing. And I was just curious about it. And really, I mean, if I hold it on the edge like this, you can see it's like warped a little bit, but I think it's gonna, that's just the area I just painted. So I think that it's gonna like flatten out when it's all dry. I'm really curious about it. I've never tried it before, so I was just curious. And since it was 100% cotton, I figured it was decent. So you were seeing it both at the same time. I'm going to make some shadow for my petals, and I'm going to do crimson and a little bit of ultramarine, because again, I want a darker layer of red, right? And remember how I said it, we talked about the glazing and how reds and yellows tend to not want to glaze. We don't see that difference. So what I do is I borrow from another color on my palette, and by adding a little bit of blue, they're fairly close in the color wheel, so they're not going to make mud. and they're close enough that it's not going to alter the color too much. And I want my shadow at the bottom of the petal and kind of in the center, because the edges of these petals want to curl in. And I think I'm going to go back to that number 6 brush, because that 10 holds so much paint that I'm ending up with a puddle. You can even go with a smaller brush if you want to. I like this number 6 because the bristles are nice and long. Holds plenty of paint and water. So I'm just actually sopping up a lot of that color with this brush right now. But see, keeping it light on the edges, you get that kind of like that little cupping effect. Let's go over this one since I spilled some paint on that one already anyway. And see how easy it is to give you that depth. Just all it is having that lighter edge and just working in some layers. Very, very easy to do, guys. I think a lot of times we make things a lot more complicated than they need to be when we're painting. Lila, what's your favorite type of painting to do?
I like acrylic painting.
You do?
Yeah.
She's a rebel. I think you and Maisie both prefer acrylics to watercolors.
Yeah. I like watercolor too. I just don't do it as much.
Yeah. Do you think that because like watercolor is what you usually give in to work with when you're a kid, that makes you not want to paint with watercolor now that you're older?
Not really. I don't think I ever thought about it like that.
Oh.
I don't know. I guess that could be it, but I didn't. That, not something I ever thought about.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I just like how opaque acrylic paint is,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go over it really easily, and you can't really do that with watercolor.
That is definitely an advantage to acrylics. I'm going to put a shadow on the back side of this petal and just leave that ridge highlighted. Now just that glaze, look at these petals next to those petals. Look out just that extra glaze, how much it makes those petals look full and rounded versus these that just look very flat and, coloring book. Did we have another question?
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
I struggled to paint layered flowers like peonies.
Peonies, yep.
And roses because I get lost in the petals and struggle to get the right contrast and glazing. I practice a lot. What would you suggest?
I would suggest go big. Get a big sheet of watercolor paper, project the picture with a projector onto it so you have a really clear drawing, because if you're getting confused in the drawing stage and so you fudge some squiggly lines for petals, then you go to paint it, you're going to have a lot of trouble because your drawing isn't going to be accurate. So if you feel like maybe you get bored or it feels tedious to do the drawing, if you project a photo onto a larger piece of paper so you can have big petals to work on, it's going to be so much easier. And take breaks. Don't feel like you have to do it all in one go. And you're going to have a much easier time of it. Because then you can go petal to petal. You could even take like a Post-it note and cover up like parts of your reference photo if you feel like you're getting mixed up and lost. And if you're working from a real flower, take a photo of it because it's probably going to get go brown and change and wither on you as you're painting it.
Do you listen to music while you draw?
I typically don't. I tend to put on podcasts or have just have something. I like listening to people talk, so I usually have something like that or the radio, like the NPR on or something like that, so I can hear people talk in the background. What about you, Lila? Do you listen to music or do you have movies playing? Or...
I do. I listen to music usually.
Yeah.
Or I'll watch like a show or something.
Mm-hmm. Probably get more done if I listen to music. I wouldn't be so distracted.
Mm. Yeah. I sing along with it.
If I really need to get some stuff done, I don't listen to anything or have anything going on, because it's funny, it does affect your productivity. You can get a lot more done if you're in silence, But sometimes I just find that like it kind of helps my creativity to have that chatter on. Unless I'm super focused because I have to get something done in a certain amount of time. Or if I'm recording voice at the same time.
Question. Your Learn to Draw class, is it good for beginners with little knowledge?
Yes. Yep, it's designed for beginners. Oh, and all the classes, there's a coupon code in the video description. All classes are 50% off for the month of April with that coupon code. When you check out, hit the click on the add coupon word. I wish it was bolder because people miss it sometimes. If you do miss it, email me, artstudiosofbangor@yahoo.com, and I can correct your billing. But just click on add coupon, add the coupon code, and you'll get 50% off for the month of April. But yeah, that was designed for beginners. It's one of my more popular classes, and it's a fun one, I think. There's a lot of content in that class. I'm softening that edge because it just seems a little harsh. The edges are softer down here because there's not so much harsh light getting to it. Over here, you've got a really harsh light on the flower. But as you get kind of buried down here in the leaves, it's darker, but it's also softer, so you don't have quite a contrast between light and dark. And I can even glaze over some of that brown that I put in there for shadow earlier to help tie everything together, and I can bring some of that red down into the brown stem. And that just helps it feel like it all is part of one flower. When you have real flowers, really pay attention to like the edges of leaves, the edges of the stem. A lot of times you'll see colors from the petals repeated in other parts of the flower. And it really helps it look nice and harmonious when you're painting that way. If you pay attention to things like that, when you have an opportunity to see live growing flowers.
Do you have a debut date for your release on the Glass, etc. course?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I've been saying it'll be out in a month for like the last 3 months. I am hoping within the next 2 months I will have it all filmed. We still have some construction going on at the house. It's going a lot slower than expected, and I'm turn my reference photo around so I can make sure I'm getting the shadows right. And also with the kids home from school, there's a lot more noise in the house where I'm recording, and I'm recording in the basement. I don't have a quiet office to record in like my other classes currently. So it's been a slow going, but I'm hoping I'm hoping in a month I will have it completed. I think that's a pretty realistic goal. Now that I put that color in, now I'm gonna fade it. Did you have another question, Lola?
No.
I need a little more pigment than that. As you're doing your glazes, you don't want it really soupy, because if you get it real soupy, it's not so much of an issue on cotton paper, but if you're on cellulose paper and you have real soupy paint, it's going to want to lift up your color underneath. So you want to be careful of that. So sometimes your sketchbooks, they tend to be cellulose, they'll want to lift on you. I like flipping my painting over. A lot of times I'll see something that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise looking at it upside down, that something looks a little too light or looks a little off. Okay, this is coming together now. Alright, I want a little bit more detail in the center. I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt umber. Now I can see my brush is way too wet right now, so I'm going to just kind of blot the belly of it there. Now it's much drier, but I try to get the water out of the belly of the brush instead of the tip, because I want the tip wet so that I can have a fine line, but the belly of the brush, I don't want it feeding tons of water and paint as I'm going. And I'm going to just throw in a few little flicks of just little detail of these little fringy petals. And I want them to dry pretty quickly, so I don't want a ton of water there. Now I'm going to do a little bit of green. I'm going to clean my brush. Same green, same olive green.
Owings Art stopped by.
Oh, Marty, hey, I'm so glad you could stop by. And I think Marty's got a new video on his channel I need to check out. He has the best art supply reviews. If you've ever been wondering about a product, check his channel to see if he has a review on it. It's always good information and very trusted. You can always trust his reviews. In fact, before I buy stuff, I sometimes send him a message and say, what do you think about this? And sometimes he prevents me from buying something, and sometimes I try anyway, and usually regret if it's something that he's warned me about.
Question, is Arteza Expert or Premium watercolor paper better?
You want the Expert. The Premium is the cellulose stuff. The Expert, they have an Expert cotton and they have an Expert cellulose, and both of them are really good. Their Premium things are definitely student grade. I wish they would call it student or something because it's very confusing, but Expert is their quote-unquote professional grade. They're a new company. They have their stuff made by other companies, I'm like 99% sure. So, but the Expert watercolor paper is good. Okay, I think I want a little yellow in there. I'm going to go for the warmer yellow, the Indian yellow.
Sarah said, I bet you miss drama too from school.
What'd you say?
I bet you miss drama.
Oh, school drama. Do you miss that, Lila?
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? I'm sure a lot of people don't miss drama at school.
I don't know if she meant theater or like drama. Like,
oh,
high school drama.
I would think she meant high school drama.
Yeah, me too.
I am so glad you guys got to do your play before the lockdown.
Yeah.
That would have been a bummer. I love yellow. It's one of my favorite colors. Thinking about when I get my new office, which will be my son's basement bedroom because he'll be able to move above ground after the renovation. I think I might paint it yellow or paint like one wall yellow. I have a brick wall in there. I might paint yellow. I just love a nice bright, warm yellow. Okay, let's see. I think I'm going to do...
No, she meant drama class.
Oh, she meant drama class? Oh.
Yeah, I miss that a lot.
Gonna add a little more green. Just towards the base of this fringy area. And you can continue to do a lot of layering with watercolor, but I think I'm going to skip to some colored pencils in a second just to be able to finish this up in a reasonable amount of time. Because we have been painting for an hour here. Of course, I know it's a lot more time than we ever had before, but maybe I'll do a little bit more on the leaves too, just because I feel like they need a little bit more depth. Now, this is something I'll do sometimes. Oh, you know, I never used any. I was going to use phthalo green in this piece, and I never did, but I liked it in my sketchbook, so I'm going to grab a little phthalo green to add some depth to the olive. And then, since phthalo green is very transparent, I can actually add red to it, like a crimson red or a magenta, and look at how dark that. It gives it a beautiful, like, almost blackness without mud. So, phthalo green, alizarin crimson will give you a real pure shadow color in case you need that in like foliage. Ooh, my brush has so much paint on it. Let me see if I can just spread it out. It seems like there's some areas on this paper that wants to feather, but it could still be a little damp. And it could be just I had so much water on my brush. I think that's probably it. I had quite a bit of water on my brush. brush is really wet, I get a lot of glare, and that's kind of difficult to see. Gotta tip it a little bit more.
Can you recommend a good wide marker set?
What do you mean wide marker? Like, do you want wide nibs, or you want a color with a marker set with a wide color range? Well, I'll answer it both ways. I really don't have a recommendation for a wide. The only wide markers I know of are Copic wides, and they're like a couple inches wide, I think. But as far as color range, I like the Ohuhu set of 200. I really like their markers. Those are chisel bullet tips, but they also have a set of 120 chisel brush tip markers, if that's what you're after. They're, as far as a bargain brand, they are a wonderful bargain brand. You'll pay under $1 a marker for the brush tip ones, but they are more of the felty tip, unlike Copics, so they will eventually fray, but you can pull out the nibs and put them in like the other way around and get a little more life out of them, so you can use up all the ink in there. So that would be my tip for budget markers, would be both of the Ohuhu lines. If you want to pay a little bit more, both Art and Fly and Biennial have really nice brush tip markers, and they're much cheaper than Copic. Art and Fly has refill inks, Biennial does not. So, you know, but you will pay a little bit more for Art and Fly. But you do have that refill capability, so kind of keep that in mind. You're really not going to go wrong. I also really like the Blick Studio brush markers, not their Illustrator, but the Blick Studio brush. They have refills now. They have replaceable nibs. They are wonderful. They have a smallish color. Well, actually, all of the budget ones have kind of a smaller color range than Copic, but they definitely are compatible with Copic, and you know, you could fill in your collection with Copics. I just think if you can get refills and replaceable nibs for your markers, if you can afford that extra couple of bucks, it's really worth it if you're going to be doing a lot of marker art, because you will want to refill those markers. Well, I don't think I really helped those leaves at all. I should have just stuck for color pencils, but that's all right. We can go ahead and grab some pencils. I've got a few here. You don't need much, just enough to like kind of tweak it a little bit. I think those are the only ones I used. I have got a white, a lime peel, a black grape. Actually, no, I'm sorry, dark purple. Oh, I do have black grape as well, and I have magenta. And I don't think I really need too much here. I might just add a little bit of white highlighting on the edges of the petals. I mean, it's up to you, really. That they've got some decent highlighting happening. You're not going to be able to press too hard on this because it's folded up. So if you wanted to do a lot of marker, I would recommend not folding it yet. I mean, if you want to do a lot of pencil, I'd recommend not folding it yet. I would not recommend this paper for markers. And I was thinking about doing my marker. I was going to do a big marker paper comparison video for alcohol markers, and I'm thinking about doing that as a live stream. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I figured that way I can answer people's questions as we went along, and that might be really useful replay-wise.
Do you have any tips for new growing watercolor artists?
Practice, definitely. I have a video that's called 15 Watercolor Hacks. That might help. I have a whole playlist of beginner watercolor tutorials. I would probably just check those out, because that will give you a lot of like practical things you can try right away. See, those are still a little damp, but those really don't have strong highlights on them anyway, so. Just a little bit of highlight there. And that's what I like to use color pencils for on my watercolors, just to kind of lift up little edges if need be. Add some of this purple into the foliage there. You need a little shading. If you need a little dark in some of these petals, you can add them. I really think that the values are pretty good on this, just from the paint. But it's a nice kind of fix. And the leaves are, I really can't go on them right now because they're still wet. but I can highlight the edges with the leaves if I want to, colored pencil, or I can leave them as is. But there you have it. Do you have any questions before we sign off today?
Nope.
I'll show you the one from my sketchbook here, because I did use a little bit of colored pencil. I used a little bit of magenta to highlight the edges of the leaves. I did use a little bit of white on the edges of the leaves just to kind of pop them up a little bit. And I used a little bit of magenta in the petals, but I didn't think I really needed that in the painting that I just did. And I taped the edges too. And just give me that nice frame. So if you are working in a sketchbook, that's a kind of a fun thing to do, is just tape the edges down because it gives you a pretty frame. All the information of everything I used today is in the video description, including the reference photo, so you can find all of that stuff. If you have any questions after the fact, you can type it in the comments section, and I will take a peek at that later. Do you have anything to add, Lila?
No.
No? All right, everyone. Thank you so much for checking this out. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. That really helps YouTube recommend this video and the channel to other people and helps us grow our audience here, which is always a good thing. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for moderating, Lila.
You're welcome.
And thanks to all the moderators in the chat. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, happy crafting.